Hey guys, tonight we drift beneath the waves not to find peace, but to watch a full-blown divine meltdown. Imagine the ocean grumbling to itself, the sea foam curling into sulky spirals. Somewhere deep in a coral-draped palace, Poseidon, god of the sea, earthquakes, and horses eventually is fuming. His temples rattle, his dolphins keep a cautious distance, and his trident rests against the wall at a slightly angrier angle than usual. Why? Well, you're about to see. The story begins with a tantrum that's older than most empires, rooted in rivalry, pettiness, and good old-fashioned sibling envy. And yes, there will be hooves. Eventually. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where and when you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on the craggy slopes of ancient Attica, windswept and sun-stained. Down below, a city stirs, not yet Athens, not yet mighty, just a hopeful cluster of humans trying to organize their chaos. And over it all, the gods are bickering. Athena, calm and clever, has just offered the city her gift, the olive tree. Practical, beautiful, humble, yet utterly transformative. It gives shade, oil, wood, and peace, a gift that grows. She barely speaks. She just steps forward, places her hand on the parched soil, and uprises a silver leaf tree, rustling faintly in the breeze. The onlookers, gods, mortals, birds are stunned, except Poseidon. He clears his throat, loudly. He's got something, too. And this is where it starts to unravel. You squint across the courtyard of the Acropolis, and there he stands, gleaming and glowering. Barefoot, seaweed in his beard, muscles tense like a storm cloud. Poseidon raises his trident high, slams it into the stone, and boom, a saltwater spring burst forth, geysering into the sky and splashing unceremoniously onto the crowd. It tastes awful, salty, useless. Horses may be his destiny, but for now, he's serving mineral water. It's a flop. The people cough and frown. Someone whispers, "Can we vote for the tree lady?" And Poseidon hears it, loud and clear. Now, here's the thing about the Greek gods: they're not known for taking feedback well, especially Poseidon. Especially when it involves being upstaged by his niece. Historians still argue whether this particular myth is just an allegory for Athens' values: peace over war, wisdom over brute force, or whether it reflects actual political struggles between old sea cults and newer civic ideologies. But in the divine version, this is personal. You see Poseidon sulk off, barefoot and dripping, down toward the sea, not defeated, just brewing, the way waves brew before a squall. And this is where the myth takes a turn from divine disappointment to creative spite. Because when a god like Poseidon gets snubbed, he doesn't just throw plates. He invents an entire species, out of sheer grudge. But not yet. First, he stews. You drift beside him now, underwater. His palace gleams with coral columns and jeweled fish. But it's quiet, no thunder, just tension. Amphitrite, his long-suffering sea queen, glances over her embroidery and wisely decides not to ask. He storms past his hippocampus, half horse, half fish, more on them later, muttering about olives and ungrateful mortals. He's not even sure what's wrong, just that it's itchy, this rage, like sand caught under armor. And then he gets an idea, a big idea. Something no god has ever created. Something beautiful, wild, terrifying, and loud. Very loud. Something that can gallop over land and sea. Something majestic enough to humble a tree. And, let's be honest, something that might trample Athena's smug little olive grove just once. For good measure, quirky detail time. According to one lesser-known version of the myth, Poseidon's first attempt at creating the horse was not great. Some ancient sources hint he may have accidentally created a bunch of weird sea creatures before getting it right, things with too many legs or tails that wouldn't quit. One even suggests he made a giant sea cow first. Imagine Poseidon sighing dramatically as yet another aquatic blob mooted him. But eventually, he gets it right. And that's where we're headed next, back up to the surface, where hooves are about to hit the sand for the very first time. But for now, you stand beside a god with salt drying on his shoulders, his eyes fixed on the horizon, and one phrase echoing in his chest like a war drum: "I'll show them." You blink, and now you're in the shallows, barefoot, robe clinging wet to your calves, the tide fizzing around your ankles like Poseidon himself is breathing beneath it. The sky is bruised blue, the kind of overcast that makes everything feel like it's holding its breath. You're not alone, there's a gathering forming right along the water's edge. Hermes is here, leaning on a rock like he's waiting for a punchline. Artemis has brought snacks. Apollo, shirtless as usual, strums his lyre absently while side-eyeing the surf. Everyone has heard the rumors Poseidon is up to something. Again. And sure enough, here he comes, thundering out of the sea with all the subtlety of a toddler in a tantrum. His beard trails kelp. His eyes flash stormlight. His trident drips with anticipation now. You might think the gods would be used to divine displays of drama by now. But no, there's always a crowd when one of them decides to show off. Especially when it's Poseidon, who's got the flair of a Broadway diva and the emotional range of a sea urchin. He strides onto the sand, jabs his trident down, and nothing happens. Not immediately, anyway. A moment of awkward silence hangs. Hermes coughs politely, a crab scuttles by, unimpressed. Then, the earth trembles, the beach splits like bread dough under pressure. Foam sprays, and from the newly ruptured earth comes something weird. You squint. It's long, kind of elegant, definitely four-legged, but also possibly covered in algae. The first attempt is not a success. Poseidon gestures like, ta-da, but what stands there blinking in the sunlight looks like a deer mated with a sea cucumber. It lets out a honking wheeze and immediately sits down. The gods stare. Hermes raises one eyebrow. Apollo strums a sarcastic chord. Poseidon waves his hands furiously and tries again. This next one has hooves, yes, but also gills, and a beak. It's like he's mixing creatures out of a fever dream. You watch one version gallop straight into the sea and never come back. Another collapses on itself like a poorly made sandcastle. And still, he keeps going. Historians still argue whether these bizarre prototypes were once part of older myths that got edited out over time, remnants of pre-Hellenic beast stories. Perhaps or just humorous additions by later poets trying to humble a notoriously proud god. Either way, you're witnessing creative chaos at a divine scale. Eventually, Poseidon slams the trident down a little harder than necessary. He's muttering now. Something about olives. Something about trees. Something about let's see her. Oil this, huh? And then finally it happens. The ground heaves. Lightning flares across the sky, though there's no storm. And from the splintered earth rises something entirely different. It's tall, muscular, lean. Its coat gleams like polished bronze. Its mane tosses in the salty wind. It snorts a sound like thunder and stamps one hoof, which cracks a seashell in half just by accident. The gods lean forward. No tentacles, no extra eyes, no gills. It's perfect. The first horse, you feel the air shift, like the world itself is recalibrating to make room for this new shape. There's something sacred about the way it moves, elegant, powerful, absurdly fast. It doesn't trot. It announces itself. Poseidon, arms crossed, tries to look casual. I call it a hip pose, he says. Like he hasn't spent the last week conjuring deep-sea disasters in an emotional spiral. Hermes whistles low. Bit dramatic, isn't it? Artemis nods slowly. I want 12. And that's how it begins. Not with a noble quest or an epic need, but with a grudge. A divine act of overcompensation. Poseidon didn't create the horse out of love. He created it because he was sick of everyone applauding a tree. But here's the twist. It works. Too well. The horse becomes an instant obsession, not just among gods, but among mortals too. News spreads like wildfire. Within days, tales are told of a creature that can carry warriors faster than the wind, pull chariots across plains, dance over meadows like liquid lightning. Of course, there's some adjustment. Early riders learn the hard way that you can't just hop on one of these things. Saddles haven't been invented yet. Reins, bits. These are not concepts mortals have mastered. The first few attempts to ride end in swift, painful ejection. Still, the fascination sticks. One fringe theory, barely mentioned outside of obscure 3rd century papyri, suggests that Poseidon's original plan wasn't to make one horse but an entire species of sea-bound steeds, adapted to ride waves like living boats. If that's true, then the land horse we know might be the mistake version. But if so, it was a mistake worth making. Poseidon, newly smug, begins promoting his creation everywhere. You see him now, in your mind's eye, materializing beside Spartan warlords and saying, nice sword. Would look better from horseback. He crashes parties just to bring up horses. He makes dolphins wear tiny saddles as a joke. He even tries to one-up himself by making other horse variants. Golden horses that fly. Water horses that drag people under. Ghost horses that scream in the night. Most of these never catch on quite like the original. But hey, he's trying. You can almost hear Athena muttering from the sidelines. All this, because I grew a tree. But for Poseidon, it's not just about pride anymore. It's about legacy. He's reshaped the world. In one stomp, the olive may bring peace, Yes, but the horse? The horse brings motion, power, majesty, sound and fury. And, let's be honest, it makes a much better entrance. You're still barefoot on that beach, and the creature is galloping now, circling the gods in a perfect arc of sending up sprays of sand. Apollo, who's tried composing odes to sunsets and lyres and even plagues, can't help but start writing a hymn to this. And Poseidon just watches it all, silent, smiling slightly, spite fulfilled. You're standing now in a sun-baked valley, somewhere between myth and Mesopotamia, and the horse is everywhere. Not just one, not just Poseidon's show pony, but dozens, then hundreds. They move like shadows across the hills, lean shapes streaking through dust clouds, each one a quiet miracle of tendon and fury. The mortals, of course, are not prepared. They approach horses like they're magic made solid, which, to be fair, they kind of are. The earliest interactions are equal parts awe and alarm. Some ancient herders attempt to feed them figs, others try to tether them like goats, which ends exactly how you'd expect, with broken fences and one very startled grandmother. You stroll past a campfire now, where three tribesmen are arguing about how to even describe this creature. One calls it divine dog, another says skyox. A third, older man just shakes his head and says it's the god's temper, given legs. And honestly, not a bad description. Historians still debate where the horse was first domesticated. Some argue for the steppes of Central Asia, around 3500 BCE, with the Botai people who may have kept horses for meat, milk, and maybe even the occasional joyride. Others point to archaeological finds in Ukraine, or ancient Iranian plateau sites where traces of bits and crow linger in jawbones like forgotten blueprints. The consensus, fuzzy. But what's clear is this: once humans figured out how to ride, everything changed. And that's where things get weird. Because the horse is not just a faster ox, it's a different thing entirely. Its motion weaponized, its independence scaled up. Once people realize that this animal originally born of saltwater spike can carry them farther, and faster than they've ever dreamed, they start reshaping their entire world to accommodate it. Villages become trade hubs, pots become roads, hills are no longer boundaries, they're practice ramps. You pause now beside a clay tablet, scribe, mouth agape, watching a mounted courier gallop past with a message from a king 2 weeks away. The courier doesn't stop, doesn't need to. He's one with the horse now, a two-bodied thunderbolt skimming the earth. And it's not just messages, it's warfare. Somewhere in the distance, a chariot thunders across a battlefield. It's a crude thing, wooden wheels, wobbly axles, no suspension, but it's deadly. 2 soldiers, 1 driver, 1 archer, drawn by 2 furious horses who, until 5 minutes ago, were probably grazing peacefully in a meadow. Now they're instruments of statecraft. Quirky fact: early chariot wheels were often made of leather-wrapped wood, and soldiers would sometimes smear them with sheep fat to keep them spinning smoothly. History doesn't mention the smell, but you imagine it was memorable. And here's something no one tells you: ancient horses were smaller than you'd expect, more like buff ponies. The giant steeds of Renaissance paintings are pure fantasy. Back here, your average war horse stands maybe 13 hands high and looks vaguely like it could fit in the back of a pickup if pickups had been invented, but even those early versions are transformative. By the time you reach the Hittites, horses have state-sponsored job titles. There are manuals, treaties, formal training regimens. One clay document spends 3 paragraphs just explaining how to calm a nervous horse with singing. Another outlines how to stretch a horse's legs after a long ride. Spoiler alert, there's massaging involved. The Egyptians get in on it next. You find yourself outside a sunlit stable in Thebes, where a young royal, possibly Ramses II, possibly just some guy named Jehudi, is teaching his team of chestnut stallions to respond to claps and clicks. He grins at you like, "You want to see fast?" And off they go. Within seconds, they're rounding a corner of limestone columns, chariot trailing behind like a comet tail. The driver howls something in ancient Egyptian that sounds suspiciously like yeehaw, and then they vanish into the desert haze. You're left blinking sand out of your eyelashes and wondering how Poseidon feels about all this. Because here's the thing: this wasn't the plan. He didn't invent the horse to start a mobility revolution. He invented it to spite Athena. And now his creation is everywhere, pulling pharaohs, conquering kingdoms, helping people move. Which, if you think about it, is exactly what the olive tree does too. Just more slowly, more thoughtfully. So maybe they're not rivals anymore. Maybe they're dance partners. You pass a grove of trees, now actual olives, and under them, horses rest, their flanks twitching in the heat, tails flicking lazily. A shepherd plays a flute nearby. The harmony is subtle, almost sleepy. The horse doesn't move, But its ears twitch in rhythm. And then you're back with Poseidon. He's on a cliff this time, staring down at a line of horses trudging across a distant plain. He looks unsure, not angry, not proud, just puzzled, like a kid who built a paper airplane, threw it out the window, and watched it invent transatlantic flight. Some scholars say Poseidon later regretted the gift of the horse, that he tried to rein it back and by flooding cities, or sending sea monsters to spook cavalry divisions. Others say he simply lost interest, moved on to inventing other creatures, camels, possibly, or narwhals, but you like to imagine that he watches from time to time, that every now and then, a wave breaks oddly, or a trident-shaped shadow appears in a puddle, and that's him, checking in. You sit now beside a dusty road, and a merchant caravan clops past. Horses pulling carts full of dates and honey jars. One of them russet-coated, sharp-eyed snorts as it passes you, as if to say, we're still here. And they are. Not bad for something born out of one god's temper tantrum. Now you're drifting a little later past the chariots and sun-baked empires into a colder age, where horses are no longer symbols of divine novelty, but of status, strategy, and straight-up survival. You're somewhere on the Eurasian steppes now, where the wind never stops moving sideways and the horizon feels like it's been flattened by time itself. And here, the horse doesn't just exist, it dominates. You don't walk across this landscape. You ride or you freeze. You ride or you starve. The horse isn't optional, it's the axis on which life turns. The Scythians are your hosts this time, and they waste no time showing off. They mount their stocky, scrappy horses with the ease of slipping on sandals. They shoot arrows backward while galloping forward just to keep things interesting. You spot one young rider who's guiding his horse with his knees while eating a roasted quail. Someone in the distance is playing a bone flute. Everyone here smells faintly of pine tar and confidence. The historian Herodotus, who, let's be honest, loved a good exaggeration, once described the Scythians as drinking the blood of their enemies and using their skulls as wine cups. Gross, yes, but very on brand. What he didn't emphasize was that these people were among the first true equestrian civilizations. Every person, from child to elder, had a relationship with the horse. They decorated their mounts with antler-shaped headpieces, dyed their manes bright colors, and buried favorite horses alongside their warriors. Quirky fact, some Scythian women were buried with full riding gear and weapons, suggesting they were horse riders and warriors themselves, possibly even inspiring the Greek myths of the Amazons. One grave unearthed in the Altai Mountains revealed a young woman in armor, her horse buried beside her, both dusted in ochre, like they'd galloped into the afterlife mid-battle. And then, from the east, come the game changers, the stirrup. Historians still argue whether the stirrup originated in China, India, or Central Asia, depending on how you define a real stirrup, but by the 4th century CE, it had spread like wildfire. Suddenly, riders could balance better, control their mounts more precisely, and most critically fight without falling off. It's the medieval equivalent of giving someone both a steering wheel and a seat belt. With stirrups, cavalry stops being messy and starts being terrifyingly effective. Flash forward now to the Mongol Empire. The cold is sharper here, the horses leaner, and everything feels efficient to the point of brutal elegance. You find yourself watching Genghis Khan's cavalry in motion, and it is silent poetry. Each soldier has multiple horses, swapping them out like fresh batteries. They carry dried meat under their saddles, ferment mare's milk in leather bags, and sleep and shift still in the saddle. You watch as one rider uses a curved bow to shoot a goose mid-flight without even slowing down. He catches it, stuffs it in a saddle pouch, and keeps riding. It's horrifying. It's majestic. It's weirdly impressive. In Genghis, he understood the gift of Poseidon better than anyone. Since the Bronze Age, he turned that horse into an empire delivery system. Mongol messengers, part of the Yam network, could ride over 100 miles in a day by switching mounts at relay stations. This isn't just mobility, it's instantaneous communication. 13th century style, the equivalent of medieval email, but with more snorting and manure. Some of the Mongol horses had been bred for cold endurance, shorter, hairier, with hooves that could crunch through frost-covered terrain without slipping. And when they weren't being used to crush empires or deliver scrolls, they were helping transport entire families and their yurts across hundreds of miles. You stop beside a small camp now. A young girl is brushing her horse's mane, humming softly. Her grandmother sits beside her, boiling horse milk into a curdled cheese that smells like melted dreams and socks. Nearby, a boy practices shooting from the saddle, missing wildly but giggling the whole time. The horse waits patiently, chewing grass and pretending not to be judging him. Poseidon never set foot here. There's no sea in sight. And yet, you can feel his influence galloping across every frostbitten hill. You keep moving. Because the horse always does. Next, it's Europe in the thick of the medieval period. Everything's built vertically: cathedrals, hairdos, feudal hierarchies, and the horse is now armored like a knight. Literally. You hear the clank before you see it. A destrier. Broad-chested and snorting steam like a kettle, covered in steel plates, with a plume on its head that serves absolutely no aerodynamic purpose. Riding it is a man who smells like damp wool and divine purpose. The medieval warhorse is a beast unto itself, heavier than its ancestors, bred more for short, terrifying charges than for long gallops. Its name, destrier, possibly from the Latin dexter, for right hand, since squires led them on that side. These were the Ferraris of the time, and like modern sports cars, they were often too expensive for regular use. Knights train on less flashy palfreys and save their war horses for, well, war. The knight dismounts now, stiffly, and adjusts his saddle. He mutters something about a joust tomorrow and starts polishing his sword. The horse whinnies like it's over it already. Behind them, a stable boy scoops manure with a wooden shovel, singing a bawdy song about a friar, a bucket, and a goat that you don't quite catch. And while all this pomp unfolds, peasants plow fields using much humbler draft horses, bigger, hairier, often pulling crude wooden plows through thick clay soil. These horses aren't named Thunder or Vengeance. They're probably called Bean or Muddy, but without them, no food, no hay, no knights. You walk now through a quiet abbey courtyard where a monk is copying out a bestiary. He's sketching a horse right now, sort of. It has hooves and a tail, but also wings and possibly a lion's face. Divine inspiration, he whispers, not looking up. You're not sure whether to argue. It's here, in the margins of illuminated manuscripts and the clatter of hooves on cobbled streets, that you realize the horse isn't just transportation anymore. It's myth. It's woven into dreams, laws, prayers. People pay horse taxes, write horse poems, build horse-shaped weather vanes. It's no longer just Poseidon's prank or Athena's loss. It's a cultural cornerstone. And yet, the world is shifting. Again. Steam will arrive soon. Railroads, motor cars, and eventually planes. The horse will lose its throne, but not yet. Tonight, it still rules the land. So you find yourself now in the narrowing gap between myth and memory, when the horse still thunders through dreams, but begins to fade from daily necessity. You're somewhere in the 18th century, candles flickering, and the world is getting busier, noisier, more rational. But despite all that Enlightenment fuss, people still swear by horses, and occasionally at them, especially when they misbehave on cobblestone streets. You're on a London road at dawn. The air smells like smoke, horse dung, and coffee if you're lucky. A brewer's cart lumbers by, pulled by two massive Shire horses. They look like walking topiary hedges, so shaggy their hooves vanish into fluff. Their driver hums a sea shanty and flicks the reins, but not hard. These horses are the backbone of the city, and they know it. Somewhere behind them, a dainty lady shrieks as her delicate carriage wheel gets stuck in a rut. Her coachman curses under his breath. The horses, meanwhile, sigh like philosophers. This happens every day. Horses here aren't Poseidon's children anymore. They're co-workers. They pull carriages, wagons, mail, plows, and aristocrats with equal indifference. They work. They get named things like Daisy and Juggernaut. One horse, you hear, is named Parliament, a regular at the post route. Never misses a day unless struck by lightning, which has only happened once. He got up afterward, dramatically, and yet, even as the horse becomes industrialized, it also gets romanticized. In paintings and poems and folktales, horses start taking on sparkles. People imagine unicorns, Pegasi, Sleipnir, the Norse eight-legged horse who rides between worlds. Historians still argue whether these creatures were symbolic metaphors, psychedelic dreams, or just ancient attempts at describing weird anatomy. Then, the unicorn problem arrives. Medieval bestiaries, copied and recopied by monks with poor zoological credentials, include facts about unicorns being tame around virgins and detectable only by mirrors. Or something equally baffling, scholars suspect narwhal tusks smuggled from the Arctic and passed off as unicorn horns fueled 1,000 fraudulent miracles and a booming black market. The irony? Poseidon did create unicorns in a way his horses just hadn't finished their mythological upgrades yet. Meanwhile, out in the real world, war continues to gallop. Napoleon charges through Europe with cavalry so fast it makes couriers jealous. His Polish lancers ride with absurd panache, skewering things in formation and looking good doing it. You trail behind one unit, your boots soggy, and overhear a soldier murmuring to his horse in Polish, calling her Anka. You don't understand the words. but the tone is all affection and worn in love, like someone talking to a sibling who also eats hay. You blink, and suddenly it's 1914, and here it gets grim. Horses go to war again, but this time against machine guns, barbed wire, and poison gas. You watch cavalrymen charge across muddy battlefields in World War I, sabers drawn, unaware that they're galloping straight into the end of an era. You see a horse hesitate as a shell whistles past. It doesn't flinch. It's trained not to. You, however, flinch for it. This is not Poseidon's battlefield anymore. This is hell with trenches. You walk through a field hospital where horses are being tended to by veterinary nurses, an entire new wartime profession. Some horses come in limping, ears back, eyes wild. Others don't come back at all. They die unnamed, in mud, far from temples or marble. And yet, they're remembered. The British erect statues to their fallen horses. Poems are written. Diaries saved. One letter from a soldier describes a mare who stood guard over his wounded body all night, swishing her tail like a metronome of comfort. No other creature could have done that. Not even a loyal dog. Not even a god. You drift through the inner warriors now. Cars roar to life. Tractors plow without complaint. Urban planners cheer. And horses, well, they start to vanish from cities like ghosts at sunrise. But in the countryside, they still linger. On farms in Romania, stables in Argentina, ranches in Colorado. You find them where time is a little softer and patience still has a job. You ride with the gaucho across the pampas. He doesn't say much, just clicks his tongue and adjusts his wide-brimmed hat. His horse, lean and sleek, seems to know the path before it's taken. Every hoofbeat is a language. You try to translate, but the words are old. And then you're back in Greece, oddly enough. Not ancient Greece, but modern. The ruins are ruins now, full of tourists and cameras, but out on the islands. You meet an old fisherman who swears that Poseidon still roams the ocean. His grandson points to a painting on the wall. Poseidon, yes, but riding a horse with fish fins instead of hooves. The seahorse, reborn as a legend in watercolor. The old man smiles and tells you this. The gods used to visit in thunder. Now, they come in dreams. And he's not wrong. Because tonight, when you close your eyes, it's not a car you imagine. It's not a train or plane or bus. It's a horse, black as midnight, wind in its mane, galloping across waves like their fields. Poseidon at its back, grinning like a sore loser who still made something incredible just to prove a point. You made it. And just before the dream closes, one final whisper trails through your thoughts, salty and warm, out of spite. But look how beautiful. The air is soft now. You feel it cool along your skin. Like the final breath of a summer storm fading into calm. The world slows. The horse's hooves no longer pound the earth, they drift, featherlight, across your thoughts, carrying you gently away. No gods bicker here anymore. No temples crumble, no chariots clash. There's only quiet now. The hush of myths settling into memory. Your breath deepens. One more inhale. One more exhale. You imagine a quiet meadow at twilight. Dew clings to the grass. Fireflies blink like shy stars. A horse grazes nearby, peaceful, ears flicking at the night breeze. Maybe it's one of Poseidon's first, still wandering the edges of stories. Or maybe it's yours now, a companion of sleep. No need to chase it. It's already here. Let the thoughts of battles and storms and divine sulking dissolve. Let the hoofbeats echo into silence. Even gods grow tired, eventually. Even spite gives way to peace. And you are drifting now, not falling, not sinking, just floating. Rock gently like a boat on a still sea, like a dream on the edge of dawn. So rest easy, traveler. Poseidon's done with his tantrum. The world is quiet. The horse is calm. And you are home.